Hello, thank you everyone for joining us tonight for this Zoom event. My name is Izzy Uzarali. I'm the Cooperative Party's Events Officer, and I'm really pleased to welcome you tonight to this evening to when we talk as Co-op Party members what we could best do to support and help refugees both at home and abroad. Before I introduce our speakers tonight, I just want to kick off with a few tips on how we can make this nice and interactive and friendly and a safe space for everyone tonight. Firstly, for those of you maybe hard of hearing, we're working with the RNID to close caption this event. So if you want to view this live captioning, you'll need to enable it yourself by pressing the CC button at the bottom tools panel of your phone or your laptop. This computer is being recorded. This Zoom is being recorded, as many of our members cannot access it live. We upload it to our YouTube account. So if you don't want your image to be seen, can you remove yourself from video and go to audio only? You've been muted to make the content of this call clearer, and that's going to prevent any interruptions or background noise. Only those speaking have their sound enabled. So when it's your turn to speak, I'm going to send you a message asking you to unmute, so do watch out for that. After we've heard from today's speakers, we're going to hold a question and answer session. Please could you post any of your questions or comments in the chat box, which is being moderated today by our Co-op Party staff. And then the questions we put in groups of three by Sam, who is today's chair, and we'll be hearing from her shortly. And finally, just before we start, I want to emphasise that the Co-op Party believes that our cooperative values should be reflected in our actions as well as our policies. We want all our members and our event participants to feel safe, welcome and respected in our party. So please ensure you abide by this when you're making your contributions today, and I look forward to hearing them. So now I'd like to introduce Sam Momar. Sam is the Labour and Cooperative London Assembly member for Hackney, Islington and Waltham Forest. And I'm delighted she's going to chair tonight's event. So over to you, Sam.
Thank you so much, Izzy, and it's a real pleasure to see you all. As Izzy said, I am a newly elected London Assembly member. I'm really proud to be Labour and Cooperative. The constituency is called North East, but that's a made-up place if you live in London. So Hackney, Islington and Waltham Forest are the boroughs that I represent on the Assembly. I can see my colleague Anne Clark from Barnet and Camden. But tonight's event is really about talking about what local government, both the London Assembly and local councils, not just in London, but in other parts of England, can do to support Afghan refugees and asylum seekers. I was really proud to have moved a motion which was supported unanimously at the Assembly earlier this month in support of providing settlement and calling on the government to provide funding for housing and for healthcare, particularly mental health support for those people who arrive in our city and want to settle here. And there's lots of trauma, but we want to make sure that people are able to restart their lives here. So with that, I guess just by way of background, it's also worth thinking about that of the people who have arrived in the UK, we know that many people were sadly not able to be brought over for reasons which I'm sure we'll get into. 5,000 of those Afghan refugees and asylum seekers are living here in London, and my colleague Anne and I and others on the Assembly are really working to make sure that we can provide support to our boroughs, to make sure that they are continuing to access funding and to work with the Mayor of London's office. So tonight's not about me though. I want to just quickly hand over to our first speaker, one of our first speakers, John, and we'll give you just a really short, just to introduce yourself and perhaps talk about what you do and what you'd like to kind of raise here this evening.
Hi, am I unmuted? Or...
Yes, you are.
Hi, thank you very much for inviting me along. My name's John Sloan and I'm co-founder of an organisation called Refugee Support Europe. I'm not going to talk too much about that side, but we've been working in refugee camps, primarily in Greece, Bangladesh, for 5 years now, with an emphasis on food security, where we've been lucky enough to partner with UNHCR. We founded Refugee Support basically where we felt there was a need, where big organizations sometimes were a bit slow to react to situations for bureaucratic reasons, that we felt we could react a lot quicker, especially when it came to food and food distribution, which we did in a very unique way by opening free shops and issuing points, or as we called it, refugee support currency, to the people in the camp, so they could come into the shops at any time, select what they actually wanted, not what people thought they ought to have, and restoring some dignity into their life and trying to bring some sort of atmosphere into it. What I thought I'd like to talk about tonight, and I only just really kind of thought about it this afternoon, is the Resettlement Program. What happened to myself was with the beginning of COVID, at my age, I felt a little bit unsafe traveling around the world still, going to refugee camps. I'm in that sort of vulnerable age, though I like to say I never felt vulnerable, but when you've got children and grandchildren nagging you not to do stuff, sometimes you have to do as you're told. I came across what they call community resettlement, which is a scheme that's run by the Home Office. It's what, in inverted commas, is what they call the legal route for refugees to settle in the UK. At first, I've got to say, I was a little bit wary about doing anything in partnership with the Home Office when it came to refugees. But when I looked more and more into the programme, it was an opportunity for groups based in the UK, local groups, local volunteers, people that care about refugees, to get involved to resettle refugee families into the UK. It's a fairly easy program to get into, yes, because it's Home Office, there are a few forms that you have to fill in and a few interviews. But basically, once you get accepted by the Home Office, they allocate the family to come over to the UK, and then you, as your group, your community group, have the responsibility of resettling that family into the UK. They are supported financially by the government. They're entitled, for instance, to universal credits from the day they arrive. You get allocated, or you get, I know it sounds a bit sort of cruel, but you get a sort of choice of family if you want it, but we decided straight away, the first family that we were allocated, which was a family of 6 that had been in a refugee camp in Jordan for 6 years, Sudanese origin. They had a fairly horrific life. The vulnerable people are the ones that tend to be selected for this program to come to the UK. It's based on what, I don't know how many of you are aware, and sorry if I'm sort of stumbling around the place, I haven't actually prepared anything for this, on the Canadian system, where it allows people in the community to form groups together and to help people settle. You have a responsibility for 1 year for the family to help them settle into the UK. So in our case, our family arrived on the 22nd of June of this year at Heathrow Airport, where we met them straight from a refugee camp in Jordan. We'd already found them a house, and we were very lucky, I suppose, being Birmingham based, I should add as well, and a very strong community, lots and lots of help from Birmingham City Council in this project. We'd found a house, and we'd also found a landlady who understood what we were trying to do and set the rent at a price that could be would be affordable for the family going forward. Unfortunately, they had to go into isolation for 6 days for 11 days when they first arrived. But our main job to support a family was to find housing for them and furniture. So the furniture was easy again, quick call from the local community, and the house was over furnished in a day and a half. We were had too much furniture. Our main job as a community sponsor is to do things like get the children into school. So in our case, we had 4 children, 3 of school age. So 4 school age ones were 4, 7, and 10. So the first job that we really had to do was to find schools for the children. Very important. I mean, only one of the children had ever actually been to school, and it had been very part-time in Jordan. prior to that. Lucky Birmingham is a city of sanctuary, and even luckier that Birmingham has what they call schools of sanctuary as well. And we were able to get all 3 children into one school, which is only sort of 15 to 20-minute walk away from where the family live. The next job that, or equally as important, is doing the universal claim credit. And I've got to say, unfortunately, it was my first real introduction to the horrors of universal credit and filling in forms and what it involves. But it's a very important part of what the local community do, is to help the family financially. Anyway, we fought our way through that. The next thing is the family arrived, they're Arabic speaking and they don't speak any English. Please tell me when to stop, because I'm not looking at the clock to see how long I've talked for. They have to, part of the agreement with the Home Office is that they go do ESOL 3 times a week minimum to learn English. And again, luckily we were able to get the family into ESOL in Birmingham City very quickly, and we were able to split it so that the father goes in the morning and the mother goes in the afternoon, so that the one remaining 19-month-old baby has permanent childcare as well. I'd really, and this is what I was getting to, a lot of people have never heard of this community sponsorship scheme. It is a fantastic scheme, because anybody that comes over on that scheme is over and above the numbers that the government already commit to. I was speaking to the community relations people last week, and they're expecting that within the next 4 to 6 months, people will be able to welcome Afghan families under the same scheme into the UK. It's a great scheme, and I'm happy to answer any questions about it, or if anybody wants to contact me about it afterwards. I'm a little bit limited now on time, and I realize there's far more interesting things to listen to than me. But this community scheme is fantastic. It's a way that people in the UK can help refugees start a new life. And I can tell you, the family that we sponsored, the first family, and I say it's the first family because we're really looking at sponsoring another family, it has changed their life completely. It's a whole new life for them.
Thank you. I'm going to take the other speakers just to speak for 5 minutes each as well. And then, as John has said, there's a great opportunity to draw on the speakers' experiences and ask questions in the chat. But thank you for that opening contribution. I would like to move on to Alice Mpofu Coles, please. Would you like to, can you unmute Alice, please, Izzy? Great.
Hi, good evening, everybody. Thank you for inviting me to speak. I'll introduce myself quickly. I'm a councillor. I'm a newly elected councillor for Labour and Co-operative Party in Reading, in Wheatley Ward. I was elected in May. Originally a refugee who came here in this country in 2002, and I've been living in Reading for the past 20 years. I'm currently also being an active member of the City of Sanctuary as an ambassador for that, which is an organization that was formed in 2005 for advocating for refugees and doing a lot of other work with refugees. And I've also researched about young immigrants that come in the country. And some of the things that I want to share tonight is about a little bit of what I had during my research for my PhD, which I did recently. And also to talk about the things that I've done during the time I've been advocating for refugees, and the things that we as people can do to influence policies when it comes to all the other things that are happening, because without influencing policies, we'll never get these things right at the end. So just a perspective of things that have happened, which can happen. The City of Sanctuary is one of those organizations that can be helpful when it comes to things that people want to get involved in. The support systems for refugees, which in general I speak when I speak about asylum seekers also, is found within local charities and groups. After arriving here myself as a refugee in 2002, and support I got from small local charities, like Grundig Refugee Support Group, is immensely important to how you support refugees. Most of the work is done locally, and we should be aware that most of the work is done within the small sectors of the charitable organizations and individuals. And the immense poverty faced by refugees, which I also experienced with 2 children, is continuing, and it hasn't stopped for so long. One of the things that I found that is helpful in the time that I've been advocating for refugees before I even became a councillor was the amount of work that charities that do work with refugees, and the expansion of how they need so much funding, especially now with COVID. Things have been very, very difficult, and they are the pillar of our societies when it comes to that. For me, I'll give an example that when I used to have problems of finding anything, mainly like things like uniforms or even just food, other different kinds of sources of food, I'll go to the local refugee. They had a day, an open day where people would come in who are refugees, and they'll give you something. That you find uniforms donated by people, or you find food and all these other things. So these things are continuing to happen, but all these places are very much stretched. So the City of Sanctuary, what it does also on another hand, as an organization that I'm an ambassador for and also a trustee, you can get involved by welcoming refugees in your own city. There's the City of Sanctuaries, which you can log for. There's the Gardens of Sanctuary, which can be helpful for refugees for their mental health. Then there's the Libraries of Sanctuaries, which can help people, new communities like refugees coming in, invite them to the library so that they can be able to learn English. There's also the School of Sanctuaries. Children come in the country, they need places where these schools are important to understand about refugees. A College of Sanctuary is also another one, and Universities of Sanctuary, which is one of the other pillars where they're offering scholarships to refugees that are coming and helping them to start their new life, let alone at this moment as Council of Sanctuaries. So if you're a councillor, you are able to be a Council of Sanctuary by showing yourself that you're able to advocate for refugees, offer them places to stay, like we've seen with Afghan refugees that are coming at the moment. One of the projects that has helped, which I was involved in, was called the Grundig Project, which we did in 2012, funded by EU. Women learning together. What was identified through research was that many women specifically were coming here, let alone not speaking about men, of course, it happens. And they had a lot of skills, but those skills were not being used to restart their life, and a lot of them were really losing their confidence and not integrating into the community. So it was important to share their experiences and support them to find networks of how they can be in safe areas and improve their quality of life. It helped a lot of others to restart their life and find communities where they can engage with things they wanted, but then it stopped being funded. The other things that I wanted also to bring about, which is important, is that the policies are very important. We've seen now with the National Immigration Bill, is very, very dangerous, and it seeks to open offshore places inside to process refugees, in other words, wanting the good immigrant as per se. So we've seen what has happened to Australia, and we need as people to influence policies. We can campaign as much as possible, but as long as policies still remain as they are at the moment, we set to fail when it comes to refugees. Looking at the poverty, still we have new immigrants coming like Afghanistan, but there are still also Afghan people who have been here for several years who have not been processed in the Home Office. And so we are bringing these ones at the moment and being able to process, the government processing these ones, but the ones that are there are still waiting to be processed. We've seen that they want to do also the offshore of having islands, We know what has happened with Guantanamo Bay, where people are staying still, although they pretend it's not a prison, but it is a prison when you are put in an island and not alone with other refugees. It's not a psychological well-being, and refugees seem to suffer a lot with those kind of things. So we need to be influencing policies, whether you're in universities or in other places that you are a politician. The way to influence policies is not only to write, but to make sure systematically that things change, and they need to change. There's no better time now that we need to be talking about this than at this moment about how we influence policy. One of the participants that was in my research wanting also to put quickly about the separation of families, which is not right. And also this national bill, again, will persecute families that want to be together. There's nothing like a safe route when it comes to being a refugee. One of the children, that the young people that are interviewed, who came also as a child, the 1.5 generation born in their country, and they come to join their family. When he arrived here, he said to me, what is a home when you can't be with your parents? And when you meet them, you do not bond because you spent 11 years without seeing them because they are waiting for an asylum visa. And you come here again, you're labeled. You're labeled all the time at school because you can't mix, you have an accent, you are not as feeling as human as everybody. So where is home? And now I'm grown up, I'm over 18. I'm actually scared again, because what is a citizenship when a citizenship can be taken at any time? And what is it to be home? I don't know where is my home right now, and I'm over 18 years. So I just wanted to leave to people in this forum to just think about those experiences of young people, children, how they go through those traumatic things. And when they reach the age of 18 also, they are still not actualizing things that are happening between 18 and 30. Their parents have suffered mental health for 11 years. One was separated from their parents for 11 years. And when she came, she found that mom and dad had mental health issues. He had to be jumping barriers to go to school because they couldn't afford. He couldn't go to trips. They couldn't do any other things. And this affects them in their adulthood. So we still continuously perpetuate these detentions and all these other things. In 2009 also, we used to have a lot of detentions, let alone then. And now, again, they continue to happen. So we need to look at it this way, holistically, how we can influence policies and try very much to see how things are going to change. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Alice. Thank you for that contribution. I'm going to move on to Richard and then Paymana. I'll give you about 5 minutes each. And I've received 2 questions in the chat, which is amazing. Please do send your questions into the chat and then we will try to fill them out to the panelists afterwards. So if we could go to Richard. No, okay, sorry, my mistake. I just wanted to also say that we did have another panelist, Adam, from Bristol Bike Kitchen, who unfortunately has not been able to join us. So I'll scratch that and I will go straight to Paymana Assad. And just before you start, I just want to say that I have been really so inspired by the lived experience that you have been sharing with people, and the fact that you have tried to keep the issue facing people on the ground in Afghanistan really at the forefront of people's minds nationally, but also in terms of local government. But I will let you do your own introductions. I don't want to steal your thunder, but yes.
Thank you, Sam. Thank you, John and Alice, for their contributions. Really respect both of you said, and also to Sam for being a great ally to the Afghan people. So to introduce myself, my name is Paymana Assad. I was born in Kabul, Afghanistan, a year after the Soviet Union left Afghanistan, and the country was plunged into a brutal civil war with Mujahideen factions fighting against each other for power. My parents were actually freedom fighters against the Soviet Union. They had put down their weapons after the Soviets left in the hope that peace would emerge. But that did not look likely, and therefore my parents were forced to flee. They claimed political asylum in the United Kingdom when I was 3 years old, and we settled in Harrow, and that's my hometown. That's where I've grown up, and that's where I was educated. And I ended up running to be a Labour councillor in 2018, and I got elected. And now I'm the cabinet member responsible for community cohesion, crime and enforcement, of which the Afghan resettlement scheme falls into that. And so it feels like my life has come completely full circle. I came to the UK literally wearing just the clothes that I had on as a 3-year-old kid, and now I'm helping children, Afghan children who are refugees, and their parents are also here wearing just the clothes that they're wearing, and to try and help them settle. So obviously this conversation is about supporting Afghan refugees or refugees in general, and what we've heard from both Alice and John has been very, very useful in terms of what you guys can do to support refugees. But I just want to tell you a little bit about why we're in the situation we are in Afghanistan. So the reason why we have seen this influx of individuals leaving Afghanistan is because of the United States withdrawal on the 31st of August. There are various different articles that you can read online that can help you understand the situation a little bit better. But in summary, what has happened is that there was no structure in place to support the Afghan National Defense Security Forces to fight off the Taliban. And they became too dependent on US contractors. And so when the United States announced its withdrawal, the contractors also withdrew. And so a lot of the Afghan National Army was grounded where they could not fight the Taliban. And so along with the withdrawal, a lot of community elders created a surrender deal between Afghan National Security Forces and the Taliban, and that is how the Taliban were able to sweep into local areas and gain control of the capital as well. I was actually in Kabul myself when the Taliban took control on the 15th of August, and I was evacuated on an RAF flight the day after. That experience for me taught me that it's important for us to learn one lesson from 9/11, and that lesson is that we need to see all human beings as equal, and we need to care about all human beings in an equal manner. And the reason why I say this is because the fallout of 9/11 saw us invade Afghanistan on the basis that there were terrorist groups operating out of that country. And now we have left that thinking that those terrorist groups have been eliminated, but they have not. The Haqqani Network is a UN designated terrorist group. They are now in control and have 5 members in the interim Taliban government. Currently, the situation in Afghanistan is as follows. Young girls are not allowed to go to school above grade 6. Women are not allowed to go to work, and no salaries are being distributed to anybody. The humanitarian situation is really bad. Just today, I was speaking to one of my friends who used to work for the High Peace Council in Afghanistan. She has not been allowed to return to work. Girls have not been allowed to return to university, and women have not been allowed to return to any other workplace apart from in the healthcare system. So the situation is incredibly bad, and in terms of the amnesty that the Taliban announced, that also does not exist because people are being hunted down and revenge attacks are happening against former Afghan government officials and those who worked in the security sector. With all this in mind, there is a role that all of us can play in trying to support the people of Afghanistan. The first is advocate. So making sure that just because now we have some Afghan refugees here, we can forget about what is happening in Afghanistan. That is not the reality. We need to keep up the pressure on our MPs, on our political leaders, to make sure that they stand by the promises that they've made. The first promise is the 5,000 in the first year, the 20,000 refugees in the next 5 years. There are individuals still needing to be evacuated out of Afghanistan who have the right documents, who should be with us, including Afghan translators, including people who worked with the British Embassy, including others who've helped our mission in Afghanistan. And so writing to your MP and advocating on the behalf of the Afghan people is really, really key. The second part of advocating is voting with motions at Labour Party conference. There have been motions that have been put forward by various different constituency Labour parties. If you are also a Labour Party member, you can vote for those motions and make sure that that stays on the agenda, including tweeting your MPs too. So continuing to raise the issue of the fact that the Taliban are denying Afghan girls and Afghan women the right to work and education. The second part is obviously donating. You can do your part by donating to charities who are working on the ground, who are supporting the humanitarian effort, such as UNICEF, such as UNHCR, such as all of these other big organizations. However, there are other smaller charities working on the ground with Afghan refugees. But the other side of donation is also within your local communities yourself. For example, in Harrow, we set up the Harrow Giving page. It is a £10, £20, however much you can afford, donation to the long-term integration of Afghan refugees in and across London, not just in Harrow. That means that we're going to be using some of that cash donation for buying school uniforms, laptops, mobile phones, sanitary pads, and various other things for long-term integration. And the third and the last thing that you can do to support Afghan refugees is volunteering. And I say this by making sure that you contact your local council and ask them, are you taking in Afghan refugees? And if so, what can I do to support you? Where can I donate? Where can I volunteer? And what else is needed from me as a resident of this constituency to support Afghan refugees in the community? These are the things that I believe that you can do to support Afghan refugees, but the main thing is advocating for the Afghan people and making sure that we keep it front and center of people's minds, not just in your local communities, but across the UK, and making sure that you center Afghan voices in regards to the issues that are happening, because we're a small refugee population in the UK. There aren't many of us. Lots of people don't even know what languages we speak. And so reaching out and learning that will go a really long way for advocating for Afghan refugees and speaking positively about the contribution that many of them have already made to the UK. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Paymana, and thank you to all of our speakers. There's some really strong themes coming out there, and it was just really good, I think, to share your reflections as having been in the thick of it, so to speak. And I suppose as I take the question, just worth remembering that we are here as cooperators to find solutions to issues, but in the backs of our minds, and certainly at the Assembly and the Labour group, many of us are Labour and Co-op, you'll be pleased to know, but in our group, we are very mindful of the fact that there are lots of people that should be here that were not able to board flights for a variety of different reasons. But with that being said, I just want to take, I've received, I'm going to take one question from Jean-Roger Chilumba, if that's okay. And the question was two, so I'll put them to all three of you, and then I'll add a question, and then if you would like to take them together, that would be fine, or we'll see. So the first one is a question actually to John, but obviously many of you, the others two, can answer. How many families has the Resettlement Program settled so far in the UK? And will the Tory government, with their obsession for curbing immigration, support the community sponsorship scheme? So that's kind of looking at the long-term prospect of the community sponsorship scheme. And then a little bit about the City of Sanctuary and all of the other organisations like Library, University of Sanctuary. Are you funded by the government? So all those organisations funded by the government, and as a councillor, have you reached out to other councils in other boroughs across the country to raise awareness and also share what you're doing in your local authority? That would be that. And I guess my third question is to the whole panel, which is around, obviously there is lots of complexity, as you said, Paymana, that there are security threats from the government's perspective associated with Afghanistan, which is why the reasons given for why we invaded in the first place. And obviously we want to make sure that we are supporting anybody who is in need of support. And I wonder how we as cooperators can overcome the good immigrant narrative. That's my first one. And again, in the spirit of cooperators overcoming issues, we've all talked about really great things that you're doing or that people here can do. And they're all kind of, we can all contribute in our own way. But one thing which has arisen and which local authorities have come up against in my own casework and conversations with MPs in my constituency is around issues with Afghan refugees joining family here. So people that are settled here, who are council tenants or residents, that is having the completely counterintuitive impact of making the person who is here homeless because they are overcrowded. I wonder what suggestions you have to advocate for that, because we don't want to embed poverty into a population of people who have already come from a position, as you said, fleeing with the clothes on their backs. So I will hand over to you, and do you mind unmuting the speakers, Issy, please? We'll go to, great. Oh, Alice unmuted first. We'll go to Alice John Paymana, please.
Thank you for the questions. I wanted to allude to the one for the city of Sanctuary. It's not funded by the government, it's a charitable organizations. And so local people, let's say, for example, there's a garden, some people run their own gardens. What they usually do, they reach out to local charities or refugee communities to say, we've got this garden, and would you like to come and participate and be part of the garden, so that it helps a lot with mental health. And they can also register their garden as a garden that accepts refugees as a sanctuary garden. So universities as such, the other thing I wanted to speak about, which I also do because I do some assessments for universities about getting the award as universities of sanctuary. For example, recently at the Reading University where I am, we interviewed, we've had scholarships that have been there, and new refugees who some of them cannot afford as much as possible to go to university are given those scholarships to start their new life and restart their own life. So all of that, I'll put on the chart about the city of Sanctuary and how people can get involved as legal as possible. It's just volunteering and donating as much as Paimara was saying about all these things. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I have seen that Paul Summerfield, you've got your hand up. I'm just going to go to John and Paymana, and then we'll come to your question, if that's okay. So John, would you like to?
Okay, I can't answer the question exactly on how many families have come to the UK under the scheme, but I think I wouldn't be far wrong by saying about 500, but the scheme hasn't been running that long. And the great thing about it is that the scheme, any families that come over under the community sponsorship is over and above any numbers that the government have committed to, if they are to keep to those figures. As far as help from the government, I have to say, and I think I said at the beginning, I went in with a little bit of fear and trepidation about working with the Home Office, but there is actually a team that are based in Sheffield from the Home Office who do nothing but work on this community sponsorship scheme. And I've got to say, they have been, and it's still a difficulty saying, they have been fantastic. The help they've given us, the advice they've given us, just the things of making sure that when the biometric cards or their ID cards were all issued and ready to go. Because don't forget, these families, when they arrive, they are the same as any UK citizen, any UK. So they're entitled to work, they're entitled to benefits and everything else that goes along. And there are a lot of organisations that can help you on the way of getting all that sorted. But to answer that specific question, which is the political one, I have to say, I can say it two ways. As I say, the Home Office team have been fantastic, but this also, the downside to it is the thing that the Home Office uses, saying there are legal ways and illegal ways. Of course, there is no illegal way under the 1951 Geneva Convention for Refugees, but this community sponsorship scheme is what they do call one of the legal routes for refugees to come to the UK. And getting refugees to the UK, I'm now of the opinion we have to go any way we can to help these people. And if that way happens to be through the Home Office under this scheme, fine, so be it. If we can help one refugee family at a time, or if more of us can get together, if there's anybody here interested in forming a group, that would be fantastic, because that would be more families that will come over. And as I say, you know, I have been advised that they do expect to start accepting Afghan families under this scheme, separate to the 20,000 that the government have committed to within 4 to 6 months. And that's about the time it takes to get ready to welcome a family, because there is a lot of work you have to do. It's not hard work, you know, it's the finding the house, it's getting the furniture, it's getting things ready for when the family arrives, so everything is there and ready for them on the day that they arrive.
Thank you, John. And then Paymana.
So I'm just going to take a few questions. The one in regards to councillors working together. London Councils has coordinated across London specifically on the response to the Afghan refugee resettlement scheme. And so we are in constant communication with our neighbouring boroughs in regards to how we're managing this. In regards to some of the questions that Sam posed in regards to the good immigrant narrative, I don't think that we can fight that narrative, specifically where people don't want to listen to us. We need to make the argument that these are individuals fleeing war and conflict and that they had no other choice. And the reality is that people don't want to leave their homelands. They don't want to come to live somewhere else. If you have been to Afghanistan, you'll know that it has beautiful weather. You'll know that it has beautiful tasting food and fruit. And the lifestyle is completely different to the lifestyle we have in the UK. And a lot of Afghans do not want to leave their country, but they have no other choice at this moment in time. I know from my own experience, when my family came to the UK, my parents were of the view that they would only stay in the UK for 5 years and then return to Afghanistan. And that dream was never realized. And so that hope still lingers in a lot of refugees. And we just have to make the argument as internationalists that we live in a globalized world, and what happens here impacts people there, and what happens there impacts people here. And we have to try and make that argument that way. In regards to rejoining of families, of individuals, for example, already based, I can give you an example directly from Harrow. We have one of the largest British Afghan refugee populations in London, living in Harrow. And so we already have a lot of these complex cases coming to us where we have family members living in Harrow who are British nationals, and their wife and children, for example, were evacuated from Afghanistan and now in holding hotels. And the Home Office has refused us to reunify those families in our borough, because they say that that will impact their immigration status and their right to refugee status in the UK. And so what we need is people like you guys, the cooperative members, to lobby and advocate for individuals like this. So like I said, writing to your MP and raising this so that they raise it with ministers in written questions or in orally in the House, so that we push government ministers to change Home Office policy and allow local authorities like Harrow to help reunify these families. Because what we're facing now is the complexity of trying to figure out, so we have a husband and a child in Harrow, and we've got their wife and 3 other kids in a holding hotel in Nottingham. How are we going to reunify this family? Are those based in Nottingham going to be moved somewhere else across the country, and us expected to just be okay with that? There is complexity in this, that you said some of these individuals will be presenting as homeless because they are overcrowded and therefore cannot live in that cramped accommodation for longer. We have seen families leave holding hotels and actually join their families in Harrow. And the Home Office has threatened those families by removing their access to the ARAP scheme, which is the Afghan relocation scheme. So we're facing these issues on a constant basis, and we're trying to advocate to the Home Office directly, but we need a push from the people. So you guys writing to your MPs and advocating on behalf of these families to allow local authorities to reunify individuals who are British nationals with those who've been evacuated from Afghanistan.
Thank you so much. That was really, really interesting. I love the point about my parents only wanted to stay for 5 years, mine too, and 45 years later, they're still here.
30 years later, they're still here, yeah.
So I just wanted to take Paul, and then I'll come to some questions which are in the chat, which I have noted. Thank you for your patience, Paul. Could you please unmute, Izzy? Paul Sommerfeld.
Yeah, thank you.
Great, we can hear you.
Thank you very much, Sam. My question too is to Peymana. Peymana, you mentioned in your opening remarks that there's an issue that many of us don't really understand even what languages are spoken by people in Afghanistan. I'm involved, I'm chair of a charity called TB Alert and concerned with tuberculosis. We have a history of preparing materials for the NHS in a variety of languages on TB. We've been approached by people in the NHS to do something relevant for Afghan refugees. At the moment, people seem to be talking only about Dari as the language to prepare. Is that sufficient? So I think you, Peymana, you have to unmute.
Yes.
Yeah.
So can I just take this quickly?
Yes, of course. Yes,
Question to answer. So the two main languages that Afghans speak is Dari and Pashto. And many of the Afghan refugees that we're seeing arriving in the UK speak the Pashto language because many of them worked with British forces in Helmand Province. Helmand Province, the majority of individuals who live there speak the language of Pashto. And if you needed someone to do that translation for you, I know individuals who can and would be more than happy to volunteer.
That would be great. Okay, thank you very much. And I've already.
What I'll do is I'll put my email in the chat box and you can contact me that way. Yeah,
that would be lovely. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Oh, love that. Okay, so I've got 3 questions which I will put to the 3 of you, and then a thought from Val Woodward, which we might want to think about while we take more questions. So the first question is to Peymana around what's your experience of the Taliban? Have they changed and can they be trusted? And that is from Jean Roger again. So there's a question in the chat from Val about she has a Labour and Co-op MP, Luke Pollard, who does excellent work regarding refugees in Plymouth, but the local Conservative council are not. And what suggestions over and above what we have discussed today can you suggest for local members, maybe to start their own initiative? And that's to the whole panel, but perhaps John and Alice might have a view on that. And then I guess the essay question is around really how many Afghan refugees can we afford? You know, whether in terms of money or in terms of numbers, like what more do we need to provide sanctuary, for want of a better phrase, to those people that need it? So we'll start, if you can unmute the other 2 speakers, please. We'll start with Peymana with that one, about your experiences of being in Afghanistan and Kabul.
So I travel to Afghanistan every summer, and I've been doing so since 2007 to visit my family members. And so when I went, I was a teenager, and it really changed my outlook and perspective on life. It's one of the reasons why I ended up working in the charity sector and moving towards, girls' rights across the globe, but also here at home in the UK. And the reason why I was so impassioned to do that work is because of the reality on the ground in Afghanistan in regards to the rights of girls and the rights of women. And if any of you remember, there was a BBC documentary that came out in the late 1990s. I remember watching it as a child, and it's a specific image that has stayed with me since forever. It's an image of an Afghan woman in what you call in English a burqa, but what Afghans call chadari, which is the blue mesh covering that Afghan women wear. And she's kneeling in the Afghan football stadium. And a Taliban fighter has a gun pointed at her head, and he executes her in the middle of that football stadium. And that image stayed with me for the rest of my life. It still stays with me today when I think of the Taliban. So that's sort of the memories that I have. But the memories from on the ground that Afghan women have is the Taliban denying them the right to education, the Taliban denying them the right to work, and the Taliban forcefully keeping them at home, basically prisoners in their own home. And I don't say this because, I'm anti-Taliban or whatever. It's an ideology. It's an extremist form, a Wahhabi form of Islam that the Taliban have adopted. And this extremism comes from religious madrasas, where they are taught this specific version of Islam, and therefore they carry that out when they come into Afghanistan from across the border in Pakistan to Afghanistan to carry out these forceful and atrocities against the Afghan people. Have the Taliban changed, and can they be trusted? I don't think that the Taliban can be trusted, because they say one thing to the international media and they do something else on the ground. And I can give you specific examples. The first is the issue of amnesty. They announced a widespread nationwide amnesty for those who worked in the previous government, those who worked with the Afghan National Defense Security Forces. And the reality on the ground is completely different. We saw beheading videos, we saw people shot and killed and beaten. And these videos are circulating all over social media. There are individuals who can provide testimony to this happening. And these are revenge killings. Therefore, this is not amnesty. The second example is the Taliban gave a press conference in Kabul and said that Afghan girls would be given the right to education and that Afghan women would be given the right to work. And this was not reality. Afghan women turned up to work the next day after hearing this, and they were denied entry into their workplace, and they were told to go back home, and they were told that their jobs would be given to men. And there is a clear example of this from the southern province of Kandahar in Afghanistan, where Afghan women journalists were turned away from their jobs, including in the departments that were run by the previous Afghan government. So have the Taliban changed? No. Can they be trusted? No. But we don't have any other option but to try and pressure them into changing, because what we understand and what we know is that the United States, NATO, is not going to intervene in Afghanistan again. They fought a 20-year war with lots of blood, sweat and tears, and there is no appetite nor political will to intervene or engage in Afghanistan in a military way ever again. And so what we need to do is use our soft power and international pressure to cut off funding to the Taliban regime, to stop and make sure that nobody recognizes the Taliban regime, and withhold all Afghan central bank assets until the rights of girls and women are reinstated, and the rights of minorities and other religious groups. It's a very complex situation, and it's one that's very unique that no government or NATO nation has ever been in before. How do we engage with UN designated terrorists?
Thank you so much for that. Very comprehensive, lots of stuff to think about there. So I want to move on to a question to John. There was that question from Val about what people could do in this particular case in Plymouth, other initiatives to get involved and make sure that they're able, like local people are able to support them, maybe the local co-op group. I know that you've dropped your email address in the chat further up, but it'd be really helpful to hear from the benefit of your broader experience with other groups, what people in Plymouth could do to support refugees there.
I mean, if you're asking specifically about community sponsorship, it has no borders. It just needs a keen group of people in the community. So, I mean, our core group in Birmingham here, when we started this project, was a core group of 6 of us, just to start the thing going. But I think we ended up with there's probably about 30 different volunteers bringing different types of expertise. I mean, I think part of the question was that you have a Labour MP and a Tory council. Is that part of it? That it's a community-based system. So it's all about the showing to the Home Office that you are able to help a family settle. It's helpful if the council back you. With it being a community-based system, from other people I know who are in Tory councils, because it's a community project, they find it very difficult not to support their community if their community wants to do something like this. But they have no, they have a few rights, obviously, but it's very minor. The main thing is to get your group together and show that you can do it and that you have support from the community. And I found getting support from the community, most probably having dealt with volunteers on the other side of what I do, getting local volunteers and support was very easy. You know, my inbox was full for weeks and weeks of people wanting to know what they could do to help and bringing specific skills. You know, doctors, nurses, teachers, and everything. And just going back to the city of sanctuary thing, yeah, certainly it helps that Birmingham is a city of sanctuary, but actually the one that I really am so grateful for is the school of sanctuary that took the 3 children together, because we were struggling to get 3 children into school together, because it was important that we didn't break up the family where possible. We didn't want sort of children having to go off to different schools. You know, they lived in refugee camp in Jordan for 6 years. So the 2 oldest ones, you know, have done the full 6 years. The youngest one and the youngest 2 were born there. You know, so it's a very close unity, family unity, and it was so important not to break that up. But no, I mean, you know, if you're determined, you can achieve anything. And community sponsorship, if you have the right group of people, you know, go for it. It will happen. If you're committed, it will happen. Doesn't matter who's running the city or the town that you live in.
Okay, thank you for that really helpful contribution, John. And so finally, I'm going to just ask that slightly nebulous question to Alice, but others may want to comment, which is how many Afghan refugees can we afford? But just before I pass over to you, I've been doing a little bit of research, well, actually researchers in the Labour Group office have, and I'm aware that the government have pledged £20,520 per person for the integration offer. I mean, I was wondering today whether that sounds like a lot of money, but obviously we're talking about settling somebody now. The question in my mind is what happens to that person at the end of that period of funding? And then just some other facts and figures that the government have also pledged around £28 per person per day to provide incidental expenses to some people that arrive here. There have been issues with people. I know that if you know East London, Old Street, Shoreditch area, there is a hotel there where people are staying, and that's on the Islington Hackney borders, and people have not received that money. So I just wonder, with all of that in mind, pass over to you, Alice, just from your experience, how many people how many Afghan refugees can we afford? What does local government need to provide sanctuary?
I think more or less we are not saying that there's a number of you can't put counting of heads on human beings, and most of it, if you look at the statistics, it shows that the highest number in Europe of refugees that have been there are in Turkey actually, and Germany has taken a lot more than any other country, more than UK itself. So even holistically in the world, most of the refugees are also found in what we call the global south, in these places where there are so many of them. So talking about 20,000 or 2,000 to people, it might seem a very high number, but most of the places that actually are hosting refugees are the poorer countries. If we look at the statistics that are there, and most of them are in Africa and Asia that are hosting all these refugees. So to look at how we expand this is always about, I go back again to how we deal with policies. I always say one refugee without hope is too many, because if there's one child who doesn't have any hope, I was separated from my children for almost without them being asked not to come. There were systems in place to say you had to prove then that these were your children, and I don't know how I could prove when I was here. But seeing my daughter come at the airport and she couldn't remember me was the reason that I've advocated since I came in this country. She looked at me and couldn't remember. It was heartbreaking, and that stays with me, just like Paimina talked about one cloth that she was wearing. Indeed, she's devastating. You can't put a number on the people. I know people talk about resources, but one of the things that we are trying to do together with all those people that are involved in advocating for refugees, the values of cooperative is become win the hearts and minds of people. That's the most important thing. Win the hearts and minds and explain. The stories are the most powerful things that you can tell people. People say, oh, we don't have enough housing in the UK. But we also look at, as councillors, how many houses are boarded around which don't have anybody. Why do we have those houses? How can we make housing much better in that sense? Because there's a lot of houses that are boarded that don't have anybody. And we have a lot of people that are homeless. So we need to listen to people when they're talking, also having those worries and not dismiss them, but explain and expand on that, because that helps us as cooperative and labor people to listen and hear what other people are saying and understand, so that we are able to put them, win their hearts and minds to change the policies actually together with refugees. And these stories are very powerful to tell to people in that sense. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you to everybody for your amazing questions, and my particular thanks to all of you, the three panelists, John, Alice and Peymana, for your very in-depth and well thought out responses. I'm just going to give you 2 minutes each to wrap up. So if we can just go in that order, John, Alice and Peymana, and then I think we might close the meeting. And in the meantime, I'm sure, Issy, we can probably share details either in the chat or for people to get in touch. I would be really happy to do that. So if I start with John, please.
I'm not quite sure how to wrap up, but first, just thank everybody for listening anyway. And if anybody has any questions on the community sponsorship, then please, my email is there. But just as important, Refugee Support Europe, our main focus is still on helping refugees, primarily based in Europe. We have a very big operation going in Cyprus at the moment. And just on the other thing, which is why I think I was initially contacted, one of the things we do run in that Cyprus thing is a cooperative sewing community where we sell online all the stuff that they manufacture, and every penny that is spent on any product from that site goes direct to the maker. In fact, we actually pay the maker before we sell the product. So as soon as they make the product, they are compensated and paid a fair price for that product. Anyway, thanks for listening to me. And I've really enjoyed listening to other people tonight. I've thankfully learned a lot. And I could just say one other thing. Yes. I think Afghanistan is one of the most beautiful countries I've been to. And it is, in the countryside and up in the mountains, it is just an amazing country. And I wouldn't blame anybody for wanting to go back to Afghanistan again.
Thank you so much. That was great, John. If I could move to Alice.
The COP26 is happening. We have a climate crisis in the world. And one of the climate crises that is happening is because we will have refugees again, besides the wars, the persecution and others, because of the climate change. So everybody get a message to the COP26 about climate change and how it's going to also increase the number of refugees. It's so important, whether you're writing to your MP, whether you're writing to the local council to be involved, whether you're writing directly to those COP26 people that are involved, it's important. The climate crisis is going to add on top of all the others. Refugees are moving because of climate change, and it is a fact. And support refugees as much as you can. The little you can do with your garden is good enough. Thank you.
Thank you, Alice. And finally, Peymana, but before you speak, John and Alice, do you mind dropping your email in the chat? Then people can, or whatever contact details you feel happy sharing. So I'll hand over to Peymana for the closing remarks, if that's okay.
Yes, thank you, Sam. Thank you to John and Alice for their contributions. It was really a privilege to listen to their experiences and things that they've been doing to support refugees in the UK. The thing that I'd like to leave you all with is, don't forget that the British people have big hearts, that the British people are much better than the national politicians that we have. And the reason why I say this is because we have those examples right in front of us. Look at our communities, look at the way people have come together to donate things that they have, or go and buy new clothes to donate to Afghan refugees arriving today and tomorrow and yesterday. Look at the charitable organizations who've stepped up to fulfill gaps where the government isn't leading on. Look at how many landlords, surprisingly, have come forward to offer their homes up for Afghan refugees under the housing benefit rate. Look at how many veterans have refused to stand down and not protect people who've worked with them, the translators who worked with British forces in Afghanistan, who've gone above and beyond to try and get them out of Afghanistan, and who've asked and forced and held the government to account on this. So don't let people make you believe that we don't have heart, because we do. And the British people are much, much better than our national politicians. And every day that I work on the issue of Afghan refugees, that is proved again and again and again. So that's the one thing that I'd like all of you to go away with, is that we are much, much better than our national politicians. Thank you.
Thank you so much on that amazing positive note in what is a very heavy and complex issue. So I think it leaves me to close the meeting. I just want to say, Paymana, we all as cooperators are expecting you to sign up to the Co-op Party now. We're all about solutions and discussing the issue of solutions. So this is the place for all of us to be. But thank you so much, everybody, for giving up your evening. We hope to do many more of these, and I'm sure Issy will be advertising further events on Zoom and other platforms. So have a lovely evening, and please do get in touch with all of us. Thank you. Bye.